Hello everyone, this is Lin Zheming from DotWallet and Mempool. I'm very excited to be invited to present the new features from DotWallet for developers on Bitcoin SV DevCon. DotWallet for developers is a coinless blockchain information system that can help the users to use the Bitcoin ledger without touching the coin side. It is a developer infrastructure that includes technique and marketing. It is combined with both keychain management, which is provided by DotWallet, and Bitcoin SV blockchain access, which is provided by Mempool. You can get the access to millions of users using the platform. The main feature is payment, login, API, batch token services, and more. I'm going to introduce two new features today, and we can start from the peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is written in the Bitcoin white paper, and it helps the better protection of privacy because the users are using peer-to-peer to exchange information directly, so that helps minimize the resources that is required to exchange those transactions. Only through the peer-to-peer network we can scale Bitcoin. Currently, we need a way to be connected to wallet services. Different wallet services need to communicate with each other, either by the peer-to-peer network or they can connect to the mining network, and then they will filter every transaction on the network to find out which one is wallet concerned. That way cannot scale. We need to focus on the P2P part and using the peer-to-peer method to connect directly. But currently, trusted third parties are still needed, like those wallet services like MoneyButton, like DotWallet and Handcash. Although we already deployed our peer-to-peer solution, but we still need an online server that take custodial of users' public key to help the user to send and receive transactions. The XPub, which is code, and the HD wallet contains a lot of private information. Those private information are very important and should be kept private, but the user cannot easily switch to different service providers because of the name of the paymail is fixed. So the paymail and BIP270 are used to connect different services providers, not peers. The users are limited to a specific service provider, and the user's privacy is kept by the service providers. Paymail is based on email, which is not favorable in China and many other countries because the characters, the letters in Paymail is much harder for non-English speaking people like me to pronounce correctly. So we present a different new technique to help to solve the problem. The first one is WingTalker. It's a trustless message forwarding services. And DocID, which is a decentralized identity protocol. Let's take a look at the WingTalker. Basically, it consists three parties. One is the sender and receiver, and two is the service provider, and there should be another service provider to forward information between them. So we can see this graph when the sender, which holds the public key A, need to send their message to public key B. Then public key A, the sender, will query the service provider, which might be a miner using their miner ID, or they may be service providers. They have their non-public keys, and they all holds a routing table which represents every non-public key on the WingTalker network, and the gateway which points to how we can get to connect it to the receiver, and the local socket is how they can be connected through the local network. And the matrix means the fee required to be connected. So when the public key A need to find public key B, he will query the miner to find out how to connect to public key B. Then the miner will find out that they can be connected through like miner ID 3, then miner ID 4. Then the miner will forward the message from public key A to public key B. And because both the public keys are well known, so they will encrypt their message peer-to-peer. We provide a virtual connection between two peers to allow one public key to send messages to another. Let's take a look. So we have Alice and Bob. Alice first, they were founding a payment channel with miner A. And miner A will record this payment relationship in a routing table locally. Then the miner A will synchronize the routing table with miner N and exchange information in between them. The receiver, Bob, will do the same thing with miner N. When the Alice want to send message to Bob, they will send the request to be connected to Bob to miner A. And the miner A will inform miner N through the query of the routing table, because even miner A does not know Bob. There is no direct connection between them. But miner A can still ask miner N, because miner A knows that they have direct connection. So the miner A will forward the message to miner N and pay several Satoshi fees. Then the miner N will inform Bob, send the message directly to Bob. Then Alice and Bob can establish a virtual connection, which is peer-to-peer, and send messages with each other. The best part here is the routing table. How we could synchronize the routing table. Because when Alice and the miner form a payment channel, they have a specific template to organize the payment channel. And the funding transaction has been included in the mempool or the blocks, so that every miner can update the routing table through the receiving of the new blocks. They can find a pattern and to find out, okay, the miner A has several new users, which is Alice and Charlie and so on. They can do that permissionlessly using the new blocks, or they can use gossip network in between different service providers, so that the new channel will be broadcast through the new payment relationship will be broadcasted using the gossip network, so that the miner A and the miner B will be in sync. And because the relationship is funded by tokens or Bitcoin SV, so that it cannot be cheated. Every user on the network will have a very high confidence that those identities are using different services. That is the routing table. And the user can even connect to different service providers using different fee structure. But the routing table can still be synchronized between different service providers. How to establish the connection? Alice will send a request to miner A via direct connection, because the user always need a direct connection to a miner, right? And the miner, when the miner A receives the request, they can send the request through established payment channels between different miners. So miner A and miner B are also connected and use the payment channel to exchange information and collect fees. Then the miner B will find out, yes, they can deliver the message to the receiver to Bob. Then the information are sent to Bob using direct connection between miner B and Bob. So the request is responded by Bob while the virtual connection is established. When Alice want to send the message to Bob, they will ask the miner to query the routing table to find out whether they can connect to Bob directly or through which party they can be connected. So in this situation, there's no direct connection between miner A and Bob. So miner A will forward the message to miner N. So have a conclusion that every user here is bounded to non-public keys. They can have different public keys to use the services. And the service provider could catch and index the payment channels that other service providers have established in order to form a routing table. It provides resilience and without any trusted third parties. Routes could still be queried permissionless because you can always get new blocks and to find specific transaction template. Those message forwarding services like email, you can always set up your own email server. It can be self-served. The best part here is that we can reuse the bandwidth and the infrastructures provided by miners. Miners are incentivized to connect to each other, and they can pay the usage of the infrastructure by payment channels. So even different service providers will not provide free services to forward those information. They can still collect enough fees. Remember, we have matrix column here in the routing table. The lowest fee will win. So you could not charge for a premium and hopes that someone will deliver message through your services. You only charge for a reasonable price and so that the routing server will try to use your forwarding service. And WingTalker can be integrated into Paymail. And it's like email services. It's a federated network and hub-spoke topology. The fees could be collected using payment channels, which could even be tokens without using BSV. It protects privacy because every communication happens peer-to-peer and is end-to-end encrypted. The forwarder could be trustless. They are incentivized to offer better service. Okay, that's so much for WingTalk. The next, DotID, which is a decentralized identity protocol, because in the WingTalker system, we need identities. We need different well-known public keys to offer reliable services and to offer the address book for different public keys so that we will provide identity for WingTalker system and providing a more friendly alliance system that could use phone number and existing email. You can register your phone number and existing email in a global decentralized ID system, and it could be compatible with Paymail. It helps the user, not the private key owner, to own their data. It works without touching the coins. We carefully design the protocol so that the needs for the transaction are minimum. We use transaction ID as DID identifier. So the DID will look like there is a DID as a scheme and .id as a DID method name, and then followed by the transaction ID, which is the DID method specific string. The transaction, we will find a way to embed the DID document, the hash of the DID document. We need to use hash because we need to preserve more privacy for the user. Why we need to use the txid, not use the public key directly? Because we think there will be a lot more advantage using txid. txid is globally unique, cannot be tampered with, and is very easy to trace. txid naturally reflects the time of the DID creation. You can change the public key without changing the identity, and the DID status can be quickly determined by UTXO status. These are two basic APIs. One is to get the raw transaction from txid, and the second one is to get the status of the UTXO to find out if the UTXO is spent or not. So the cost of obtaining the ID document is extremely low. Relying on the public key will bring in higher indexing costs and the overhead of passing the ID documents around. And we have flexible data embedding methods. DocID hopes to avoid touching the user's privacy as much as possible. DID identity information and files will be completely saved and controlled by the user itself, not service providers. Users can have infinite DIDs associated with the same VC, which is verifiable credentials. The public key information on the blockchain is only the digital digest and the user's public key, which is used to verify the legitimacy of the file. Using the UTXO model, we can solve the problem of real-time check of certificate revocation. When you revoke a certificate, the CA just spent the UTXO, and the revocation will happen in real time. So there's a DID document creation. First, the user will request UTXO from our BaaS bus system. Bus means Bitcoin as a service. Then the bus system will return the UTXO to the user so that the user can use the UTXO and the public keys and the registration agency's public key to generate a transaction. And the user can send the transaction along with their DID document to the registration agency. The agency will verify the DID document and use the hash to span the second output of the first transaction, and in the same time embedded the hash of the DID document into the second transaction. Why we will need two transactions? Because when we need to use the transaction ID as the DID, then we will include the DID into the DID document to make it accepted by the registration agency, so that we have to use different transactions to make it happen. But those transactions are closely connected to each other. When a BaaS receives the two transactions from a registration agency, they will assemble the transaction with fee-paying input and submit the two signed transactions to the miner and return with all transactions and local proofs to the user. This is the whole process of the DID document creation. At the end, the user gets two transactions. Okay? The first one, we have two public keys that can decide whether to span the output. And the second output is spent by the CA to provide the DID document. The hash of the transaction 1 is embedded in the DID document and form the DID document hash, which is the output of the second transaction. When we need to validate the DID document, we can check if the first output is spent either by the CA or by the user. And we can still replace the transaction, replace the DID using different public keys. In case the user lost their public key and private key, they can request a new one. So the CA can span the transaction, the output of the transaction 2 to have a new transaction. How to verify the DID document? The user will send the DID document along with the transaction 2 to the verifier, and the verifier will check with the miner to ensure the output 0, which is the first output of the transaction 1, is unspent. This is very easy because in the transaction 2, we have the out points to the output 1, which is vout 1, and we can easily point to vout 0. They have the same transaction ID. And the miner will return the UTXO status and the Merkle proof of the transaction too. The verifier will verify the DID document to match the hash embedded in transaction 2. The DID document is handed over directly from the user to the verifier, and the verifier will verify the SIG and the public key in the transaction 2 to match a valid registration agency so that the DID document can be verified. Then in the DID system, we need verifiable credentials, which is almost the same with the DID document, but it includes the points to the DID. The verifiable credential is the credential that can prove something connected to the DID, like the when we have a DID that reflects my ID card, then I will have some sort of credentials that proves an adult. Then the CA will provide such kind of proof and using their private key to sign the proof. So it is almost the same with the DID document creation. Their transaction template almost the same. And we can use the same method to verify the credential. Okay, so much for the two features. If you want to know more, you can go to developers.dotwallet.com, and the two features will be available before Q2 this year. Those specifications may be changed in the future, and we are looking for more collaboration on the two ideas. You can get in touch via business@boquaninc.com. That's all. Thank you.